So a warm welcome from the Provocation Ideas Festival, as well as Invest Stratford and CBC Ideas. It's wonderful to see so many people out there. I can't see anybody, but I know that there are a lot of people out there. The Provocation Ideas Festival, for those that are unfamiliar with it, expanded from Toronto to Stratford last year and is embracing the City of Dreamers theme this year and for the next 2 years. Through a variety of events and venues, the festival explores the dreams and aspirations of those who lived and are living in the region, from the Indigenous presidents to the current and future inhabitants. It celebrates Stratford's amazing ongoing invention and reinvention, driven by its dreamers, through community storytelling, the geographic landscape, choreography, collective art, and the voices and imaginations of our children. The festival also intends to ask a number of provocative questions, since it is called the Provocation Ideas Festival. What binds a community together? What drives it apart? How can divides be overcome? And finally, where does Stratford's best future lay? And now, CBC Ideas with host Nalaya.
Let me begin with this. Scholars tell us that the city is about 6,000 years old. That's pretty recent. That's a pretty recent invention, given the scope of human evolution. And right now, more than half the world's population, about 55%, live in cities. That's about 4.5 billion people. And in a few decades, that percentage will rise to 70%. But with climate crises causing higher sea levels, wildfires, and what we euphemistically call extreme weather events, and increasing levels of refugees and migrants, not to mention the creaky state of geopolitics, where does all this leave cities of the future? I don't have the answer, but I'm hoping these guys do. At least we're going to try tonight to come up with some insights into this whole notion of cities of the future. What is a city? Or what is a city for? Jay.
I think that when people think about a city, they think about infrastructure, dense demographics, or local amenities. But more than anything, I believe that a city is a promise.
Okay, that's a teaser if there was one. We'll go on with that in a minute. Greg.
I'll go a little bit longer. Le Corbusier, the Franco-Swiss architect, thought that they were machines for living and produced some of the most inhumane environments that we would probably consider living in. And Patrick Geddes, who was an ecologist and was the master planner of Tel Aviv, he thought cities were organic. They were living creatures. But the description I love the most, the one that makes sense to me, is by Louis Bettencourt, who's a nuclear physicist, and he argues that cities are stars, that they are social reactors where you compress social networks, not social media on your phones, but how we know each other, all of our network connections together, where you compress them together in space and time, and instead of heat and light, you get ideas, you get opportunity, you get everything that comes out of that. And that echoes with Jane Jacobs as well, where her arguments about why cities are, in fact, the keystone of human civilization and not the nation state. But I can go on.
We'll go on, absolutely. Robin, what is a city for?
Well, I agree with both Jay and Greg's comments. You mentioned machines. I think cities can be a technology as much as a hammer can be a technology to perform an outcome or a goal. But fundamentally, I think reflecting on my experience working as an occupational therapist, they can be a technology for social connection in a time where that's very difficult to come across.
Yeah. What is it that a city makes possible? When you think big and dream and imagine, what is it that a city makes possible?
I think the concentration of the people, the proximity, allows for innovation that can lead to solutions to some of the problems that we face as a society. At the same time, cities might be the source of those problems, so it's this kind of funny Ouroboros, or the snake that eats its own tail. But I'm optimistic about it, and I think that, especially talking to kids, like my niece, she's 3 now, and it's so wonderful spending time with her and getting her perspective on the city. I think cities make the dreams of children possible.
the dreams of children possible.
or they can.
Yeah, because they have the resources, the places,
Yeah.
why? Yeah.
So, one thing I've been thinking about a lot is the concept of maybe extending the playground beyond the barriers of its physical structure. So if cities were to be seen as large playgrounds for kids, what would that mean for brain development? We know play is necessary for healthy brain development, whereas kids are exposed to speeding cars and loud noise that all have, I think, pretty significant, as per their research, impact on their brains, which have downstream effects like mental illness and physical illness.
Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to those thoughts in a moment. Back to you, Greg. What is it that a city makes possible?
I would argue cities are serendipity machines. If we go to a machine, then they're serendipity engines. They are where, when you compress those social networks in space and time, you produce all of these unplanned outcomes out of this. This is the great urban experiment where you are able to, not only have, we could, in narrow economics terms, for example, you could talk about GDP and wages. And Paul Romer won a Nobel Prize for his theory of information spillovers, which solve these questions about why do people cluster in cities in the first place? Why don't they just go where the land is cheapest? This drove economists crazy for decades, and then they figured it out. But to me, it's about that potentiality of life and how do you transform it. And so going back to what it's for and what it makes possible, I'm a big believer in the French philosopher Henri Lefebvre and the English geographer David Harvey, who talk about a right to the city, that we have a human right to the city because we should all have access to that possibility to remake the city itself and remake ourselves, as Harvey puts it. So that's what it makes possible. To reinvent yourself, you have to go to a city. You can't do that in the small town you grew up in, because that's your small town, that's your family. You can only remake yourself in a city.
Jay, percolating under all of this is the word you use, which is promise. So what is it? What is it that the city makes possible? And start with that word, with promise.
So when I think about the promise and also possibility, I think that whether you are a gay youth living in rural Canada, whether you are a woman looking to work in an unconventional professional industry, whether you are an artist looking for an audience, or whether you are an immigrant looking for possibility and a better life for your family, the city makes all of that possible. And that's what the promise is and has always been. And so I think when we think about that possibility and that promise, it's about freedom of expression. It is about free movement. It is also about the freedom to belong to many communities at once. So when you live in other environments, you generally belong to the tribe. You have a singular identity. When you belong to the city, your identity can become expansive and spacious, and you can belong to many communities concurrently.
Yeah, and be yourself.
Absolutely, your fullest, most pluralistic self.
Right. So if promise is kind of what underpins what a city is, how well has the city kept that promise?
It's doing a terrible job. It really is. There are so many broken promises in the city. I'll give you an example. Let's just look at housing.
Yeah.
My grandmother immigrated here from Jamaica in the late 1960s. She was a trained seamstress. When she came to Canada, she worked in a very hot hotel laundry room, but she also sewed on the side, and she baked something called black cake. Does anyone know what that is?
No?
All right, so it's a combination between a Scottish sort of pudding, black pudding, and a Jamaican cake. And she sewed and she baked cake, and she was able to buy our family's first home in Toronto. Fast forward 40-something years, that promise is no longer possible. It's no longer possible for an immigrant. It's no longer possible for hard-working individuals like the working class. It's not even possible for young people who have invested 4 to 6 years in a university education. And if you cannot establish home, the city's promise has fundamentally been broken.
Can you just follow that up with a quick comment on how important it was to find that home for your family?
It was critically important to find that home because home and home ownership, it really, again, is not just about a place. It's really about pride and pride of place and laying down roots. And so I grew up in public housing as a child, but in the back of my mind, I knew I too could own a home. Yeah. I too could transcend the margins of public housing and poverty. And by the time I was 30 years old, I was a young professional, I was a single mother, I bought my first home, because my grandmother modeled that it was possible, and because the city created the context for that promise to be delivered.
Jay, Greg, and Robin, we could talk for hours, but this was a great start. Thank you so much. Thank you for your insights and your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm left somewhat speechless. It was an incredible conversation. But before I regain my powers of speech, I'd like to call upon the Mayor of Stratford, Martin Ritzma, who I know won't be speechless, to say a few words.
But when I think about shaping cities of tomorrow, I think of back in 1834, and there's all kinds of entities. The thing around serendipity and all that plays out. But the gentleman that designed the footprint of Stratford in 1834, the planner, designed a city for a potential of 35,000 people. And we're knocking on that door right now. I thank you for being here and being part of that. But on a final note, I want to present Miss Ayad with a book, and it's entitled Flood Tides of Fortune. Now, it's a little ratty because the only way you can find these online, if you look for them, you might find them online. But it's stories about people that played a huge part in shaping our city and inventing and reinventing it, the events that shape our city. And we're on the cusp of reinventing our city once again with the Grand Trunk site.
We're going to come away from this discussion thinking more about the possibilities, some of the challenges as well as the possibilities, as Stratford as well as all of our cities move forward in looking at how can they develop for the future. So thank you all, and safe travels home.